Okay, so we're going to forget about everything you do now, Wendy. We're going to talk about Cape Town for a little bit here. So tell me about growing up in South. So you grew up during apartheid.
And South Africa was segregated back then, right? So it was, you had the white neighborhoods, you had the colored neighborhoods, and you had the black neighborhoods, or the townships, as they called it, where most of the black people lived.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine people like yourself, adults in your lifetime, getting kicked off a train.
Beaches were segregated as well, but we didn't see the sign that said whites only. So we were on the beach, and then next thing these cops came and threw the families off the beach. Wow. I was very young, and so I didn't quite understand what was going on.
Yeah.
But I remember looking at the adults, and I just remember the tension. But I did start to see that people were dying in that struggle, and I was like, how do we gain ground if we're losing people to the struggle? So I eventually kind of switched away from that activism and started to figure out ways to help with education. And I knew that one of the biggest things I had to do was educate myself.
Hi, everybody. This is Dan and Dante. Welcome to another episode of Middle-Aged Mess, the show for people whose childhood breakfast reading material consisted solely of the back of the cereal box. Okay, today we're down under. We're talking career change. We're talking middle-aged messes. We're talking the last quarter of your lives. We're here with Wendy Alexander. Hey, Wendy.
Hello. How are you, Dan?
I'm doing good. You know, I swear, I love talking to people from Australia because I love your accent. So it almost doesn't matter what you say, as long as you just keep talking.
Yeah, we tend to get away with things, especially when we're traveling. I've traveled to Europe and America numerous times, and they do love the accent. So we can get up to a bit of mischief.
Yeah, everybody thinks you're smart and you're sophisticated and you can drink more beer than them. So you're automatically popular.
Yeah, correct.
Now, did you grow up in Australia?
No, I grew up in Cape Town, South Africa.
Oh, that's right. Your accent is a little more South African than Australian. I will say that. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just on 21 when we migrated to Aussie land.
Oh, okay.
So I have a mixed accent. And if I'm around South Africans, the accent's very strong.
Okay, so we're going to forget about everything you do now, Wendy. We're going to talk about Cape Town for a little bit here. So tell me about growing up in South. So you grew up during apartheid.
I did.
Right?
I did, yes.
And how old were you when apartheid ended?
So I was in Australia already.
Oh,
so
okay.
When Nelson Mandela came to power as the first black leader in South Africa, that was in 1994. So I'd been here a few years already.
Okay, got it.
Because I migrated here in 87. So yes, I was in the heart of the apartheid movement.
Ooh, so let's talk about that for a minute. So Wendy, you've got a very exotic look. I don't know, what's your background?
So in South Africa, I was classified as colored. So I have white grandparents. So on dad's side, there's Scottish, mom's side, there's some French, and then there's black, Indian, so I'm a bit of a melting pot.
So you were born a crime.
Real
You're born a crime, as Trevor Noah said.
I was born a crime. Correct.
Wow. I didn't know there was anybody besides Trevor Noah who was in that situation. Oh my goodness. So
yeah, lots of us.
Okay, well let's talk about. Okay, so your mom was white and your dad was black, or
no? So both my parents were considered colored, but their parents came from mixed races.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And so well, let's talk about that, Wendy.
Okay.
I mean, that's pretty fascinating.
What do you want to know?
No, I want to know everything about it. Look, his book, for those of you who don't know, his book was called Born a Crime. So I wasn't insulting you by any stretch. But
no.
But how were you treated as a kid being colored? I mean, I'm sure the white kids didn't accept you, the black kids didn't accept you. I mean, it must have been really hard.
Yeah. So that's where I suppose that was the biggest challenge, is that we didn't kind of belong to either, because you had, and South Africa was segregated back then, right? So it was, you had the white neighborhoods, you had the colored neighborhoods, and you had the black neighborhoods, or the townships, as they called it, where most of the black people lived. And I suppose the view, obviously from the white side, it was, they raised a certain way. There's laws entrenched in government to protect and to amplify, I suppose, white status. And then in the black townships, they definitely didn't trust the white people, but they also didn't trust the colored people, because some of the coloreds who, like you can see, I'm light-skinned, I'm olive-skinned.
I mean, my guess is you could, they say you could pass. You could probably pass for like an Italian.
Yeah.
Or, you know,
correct.
or Greek or something.
Correct. Yeah. And so there was that division, but then also all the laws. So there was, you know, for example, there were trains, buses, cinemas, beaches for white people, for colored people, for black people. That's how the country was set up.
Oh, so there's 3 different divisions. So coloreds were their own special group.
Correct.
Oh
yeah.
my God. Wow, dude.
Yeah. So that was an interesting.
Now, is that for your entire public, like school, transportation, hotels, restaurants? Is that everything back then?
Everything, yes. And even the schools I went to in high school, I went to a girls' school, but the girls' school was in a colored neighborhood. It was interesting because it was the first time I really encountered the mix with the white, because all the teachers were white. Apart from 2, there were 2 colored teachers. I remember the PE teacher was colored, and she also took us for history. But the rest of the teachers were white. So the first time I really mixed with white people, I would say, was going to high school.
So prior to high school, you were in the black neighborhoods, the black schools.
In my colored community, correct. So I went to a colored primary school. And the communities were very segregated. You couldn't.
Oh my God.
Look, I did one time get into the whites only train carriage because I was late. My bus was late. I had to, get the connecting train to school.
Were you scared?
And
were you scared being there?
Terrified, but I was also kicked off the train. At age, I think I was 15.
I mean, it's unbelievable sitting here in 2024. And I get that it's South Africa versus the United States. We obviously have our own history with segregation and everything else. But it's hard to imagine people like yourself, adults in your lifetime, getting kicked off a train, not being able to go to a school, not being able to get on the bus. I mean, it's fascinating. Let me ask you, when you were going through it, obviously that was your world. You didn't know any different, but did you know different? Did you know that other countries were not experiencing that level of segregation? And
oh, absolutely. So I first knew about color and that it mattered in South Africa when we went to, I was 6 years old. It was one summer, we went down to a place called Gordons Bay Beach, and it was near a friend's house. So we went down to the friends, they took us down to the beach. Beaches were segregated as well, but we didn't see the sign that said whites only. So we were on the beach, and then next thing, these cops came and threw the families off the beach. Wow. I was very young, and so I didn't quite understand what was going on. Yeah. But I remember looking at the adults, my father and my friend's parents, and I just remember the tension, the rigidness in their bodies. And I, as a 6-year-old, I was like, something's really wrong here. Anyway, we got off the beach, and I was always a curious kid, so I was asking a lot of questions. What's going on? My father was like, for one time, can you just be quiet?
I love it. You're my kind of girl. All right.
Yeah, I'm that kind of girl. But I knew. And so, eventually when we got home, when you're in the safety of your home, we started discussing it. So my father's like, these are the laws in South Africa, and you can't go here and you can't go there. And so I knew. So, I guess that's when you first identified that there's something wrong with the color of your skin. Yeah. And fear and danger and all of that starts to. And I do remember, and I say that often to people I talk to, I think I lost my childhood that day because I became incredibly serious. Yeah. Prior to that, I was one of those kids playing hopscotch, jumping the waves, building sand, a very happy kid. But I became incredibly serious and started to write poetry and wrote stories. I escaped into the world, into literature and writing, to be able to process it.
Well, yeah, they say nobody's born a racist, and nobody's born a victim of racism, right? I mean, you have to be taught it, and you were that day you were taught your place based on the laws at the time. Now,
correct.
now, again, I'm very familiar with U.S. history and what happened during the civil rights movement in the '60s. Was there a movement among blacks and coloreds in South Africa to change things? Where there was a rage against the system, or was it just at the time kind of like, hey, this is how it is?
There were movements throughout the time, probably because it was entrenched in law in 1948, and I would say soon after that the movement started. But I think what people need to remember is that most of the black people were impoverished in townships, and the colored people weren't that much better off. So when you don't have the resources, the money, the power, it is difficult to overthrow. But it never stopped. I became an activist myself in high school. And so my last year of high school was when things were really heating up in South Africa.
I mean, you guys were aware. You guys were aware of all the protests around the world, right? Stop Apartheid.
Oh, absolutely.
Now. Right.
Yeah. We knew about the protests around the world, and I suppose that also gave us a little bit of fuel. And so there were a couple of incidents where I remember. So my last year of high school, probably around May. So our high school year goes from February to November or December.
Okay.
And there was protests. In the end, all the colored schools were closed, and we had to. So I didn't have prom, which is a regret for me to this day. Right?
Yeah, that's a big one.
We were all, we had the dresses made and everything. High school was closed. It was kind of clandestine activity going on, sneaking to teachers' homes to get the lessons because we were still expected to write the final exam.
Right. Wow.
And my final exam was written at a military base surrounded by soldiers with guns. It was bizarre writing exams in that circumstances, incredibly stressful. So that was a challenging year.
So wait, were they closed because was there rioting going on, or what was the reason?
Rioting going on? Absolutely. So there was pushback against the government. A lot of tear gassing, a lot of people dying we called it the struggle, right? So people dying in the struggle, fighting against the government, being shot at, tear gas, you name it.
Well, let me ask you, as one of the colors, and I'm saying colored like in America right now, saying the word colored is not a favored term, right? Billy, I'm sorry I'm using it so casually, right? But that's what you use, so I'm using it as well. But where did the coloreds land on this spectrum? Were you more on the side of the blacks or the whites? I mean, you got more privileges than people who are in the townships, so you're scared you're going to lose even that?
Yeah, no, we probably had marginally better privileges, but not much, right? So that probably the areas, the neighborhoods we lived in were probably a bit better. But when it came to jobs, opportunities, things like that, no, it was the same.
Okay.
Anyone who was classified as colored or black, definitely not given the opportunities. I mean, I remember having conversations with my father, and my father was adamant that we went and got our education, that we go to university, because he's like, it's going to be hard enough for you when you get out of high school. You need to make sure you have an education. He was really, really adamant about that. And my dad, during the whole apartheid era, he went into the black townships, and one of the things he was doing was teaching them to read and write, because the literacy issue, it was an issue.
And
right?
What language? English or Afrikaners or something else?
So we one of the things we did was we spoke English. We were forced to learn Afrikaans in school, but people didn't. We tried to avoid it outside of school, right? Because that was another minor protest against government. We didn't want to speak the language of the oppressor, so to speak.
Got it.
Right?
Understood.
So Dad taught in English. He was teaching, going into the townships, and some of those townships is quite dangerous because there was huge. It was like shanty towns. So these people lived in tin shacks and things like that. But my father, that was one of the things I observed watching him. I was like, there's got to be a way you can make a difference. So I immediately started out, when I was in high school, I was more of a rebel. So I was going on with the activism, rallies, protesting. But I did start to see that people were dying in that struggle. And I was like, how do we gain ground if we're losing people to the struggle? So I eventually kind of switched away from that activism and started to figure out ways to help with education. And I knew that one of the biggest things I had to do was educate myself.
Now, were you fraternizing at all with white kids, white people, or that was kind of shunned at the time?
No, because you didn't have an opportunity to meet them. I met obviously I fraternized with white people through school, high school, because my teachers were white.
Okay.
But the first encounter with people my age that were white was my first year of university at University of Cape Town.
That's so crazy. That's so crazy.
That was a whole other experience. Because
there were such divisions. I mean, it's just hard to comprehend. Again, I mean, I guess for somebody who's older than me, who went through the 60s, the 50s and 60s of the United States, they would understand a little more. I have no experience at all with that type of racial separation. It's hard for me. And I'll tell you what, I will say one thing too, so I've been to South Africa. A couple of years ago, I went to South Africa and did some safaris in Botswana and Zimbabwe, which is, I mean, some of the most amazing, most beautiful countryside on the planet. But what's weird to me is that even today, and this was maybe 4 years ago, what I really started to notice is that every manager, every boss of every store and every place is white. And all the workers are black. I mean, every single one. We went into Botswana to like the way in the bush, not the bush, but like way back, and we land on this little tiny strip, and there's a safari in the trees right out in the middle of the country. And we land, and sure enough, the 3 managers of the place are all white, and all of the employees are black. And it's kind of like when you start realizing it, it's kind of confronting as an American. I think I'm somewhat liberal. It's kind of hard to watch. You feel bad, but I mean, that's just, even now with the vestiges of it, I guess, are still kind of trailing, that still exist.
Correct. Well, I mean, I think, look, even though in South Africa, the government is largely black now, it'll take years to undo the damage, and also to bring, the black tribes up to the education level to be able to run a country and so on. So that was one of the ways that I suppose the suppression and oppression was the most offensive, was the fact that they kept people uneducated. Because if you don't have the nous to run a country, you're not going to, and you see it now in South Africa, lots of corruption, people are still struggling, the cost of living is ridiculous, the crime in the country is awful. Yeah,
and you talked about the shanty towns, and I was in Johannesburg during that same trip. I mean, we drove by one of the shanty towns, I mean, terrifying. Like, it's terrifying that people have to live in those conditions, and you go 2 miles past it to like the resorts on the beach, the 5-star hotels. It's like 2 miles away. It's crazy. Anyway.
And that was the whole of apartheid. And now some of it is still going on, because, it takes probably, I would say, a few decades before you can uplift the country again from that kind of scourge, I suppose.
And I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You were answering earlier about university, when you first started kind of fraternizing with white people, what that was like for you.
Some of the classes I had, there was a balanced mix of colored students and white students. I didn't see too many black students, 1 or 2, and they were usually there on a scholarship, right? Mm-hmm. So in the classes where there was a healthy mix, I felt reasonably safe, because I could always go to my community, and I did. When I was in English literature class, I was sitting with my people. But I did do French, and I remember going into my first French class, and I was the only colored student in that class, and I can tell you that was the most awful feeling. People did not sit next to me, did not want to come anywhere near me.
Wow.
And so I definitely noticed that. We had a French teacher, so she was from France, and she was great. She was always trying to include me in the lessons. I ended up getting the highest mark in French, and she read out some of what I'd written.
Très bien, Wendy.
Can't speak it now.
That's okay. Moi aussi.
But that too, I wasn't supposed to be, and it was only in that class. I liked languages. I always have liked languages, and I tend to learn it quite quickly. So I did really well, and she read out one of the pieces of work I'd written, and that made the isolation even more.
Oh, wow.
Because, you need to know your place. You're a darkie. They used to call us darkies. You're a darkie. And how dare you end up getting a better grade than me? So there was all of that, right?
Wow.
We migrated in my second year of university. So then I
Wait,
came
so
to
before I get there,
Australia.
I just want to make one point, and I know that it has nothing to do with you, but I wonder how much of it though is like there's a little self-selection that we all as human beings go through. I'll tell you what I know. So I went to Berkeley, Cal Berkeley, when I went to college, and I remember my first year, one of my first classes, and this was 1985. Okay, so it's a while back now. Maybe things have changed. I hope they have. But I was sitting in the class, and we had 700 people in the class, and I'm going to say there's probably about 50 or 60 black people, ballpark, in the entire class, all of them sitting in one clump, kind of in the middle and the front, like surrounded. But was there a few black people among us? Sure there was, and I don't think that we were being racist, but I think that, those 50 or 60 people probably felt comfortable with their own for a little bit, right? And I hope that's changed. I think that changed. But I think there is, we as human beings always tend to go towards our people, whether it's color, gender, ethnicity, religion, whatever it is, there is a little bit of that. But to have it institutionalized like you guys had, and like America had it for hundreds of years too, it's kind of shocking to talk about it in 2024 with somebody who knows about it like you do.
Yeah, yeah. I think human beings are also wired for safety.
Yeah.
So that's what it's about, I think, and it isn't a racist thing, because I find certainly I had the opportunity at UCT to mix. I did with one who I did make a German friend at UCT who became one of my really good friends. And she was the one that was brave enough to just come up to me.
Well, the Germans don't give a shit, right? They'll do anything, So
yeah.
Okay, so let's talk. Yeah. So you said you left your second year. Why did your family leave during the second year?
So Dad had been trying to migrate the family to Australia for probably 10 years prior to that. There was lots of rejection letters. I think we got into Australia because my aunt, my dad's sister, had married an Aussie, and she was here. She'd been here for a few years, and then his other sister migrated on the reunion basis.
Okay. And why Australia? Why Australia? Because of that connection? That connection by marriage?
Yes, because my aunt had married an Australian, and so she'd been here a few years, and then, their other sister came with her 2 kids. And so it was really about, look, I think Dad had considered Canada as well, but it was so challenging to get out of South Africa, because one of the things they did there too was they placed restriction on the money you were allowed to take out of the country.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right. So we have friends here in Australia now who also migrated, and they still have money in South Africa. They go back there from time to time, have a holiday, and spend up their money there, right?
Wow.
Because there was restriction. So when we migrated out of South Africa, you came with not very much money, and you had to start this life over in a new country. We were 5 kids. I have 4 siblings, mum and dad.
Which number are you? Are you in the middle?
I'm second, so second oldest. I have an older brother.
You're still kind of in the middle, Wendy. Let's be honest. You're kind of the Jan Brady-ish of the family, but it's all right. But you guys were all educated. You all spoke English, which must have made it a little bit easier.
Yeah. So English was the main language. So English and Afrikaans was the main language in South Africa, and then you have the tribal languages. So I never learned any of the tribal languages. That was the interesting thing too. You weren't really pushed to learn any of the tribal languages. So that was kept within the Black community.
Wait, can I ask one question about that? So in the tribal communities, was their tribal language their first language always, or English? Or
yes, first language, but also forced to learn English and Afrikaans.
Okay, got it.
Right?
Understood.
So if you went to school, you had to learn Afrikaans. That was part of the curriculum. So English, Afrikaans, and maths. Those were the 3 mandatory subjects. And then as you went up in high school, you could choose, which kind of area you wanted to focus on, whether it was academic or creative or whatever. But you had to do English, Afrikaans, and maths.
Okay. So now you're in Australia. How old were you when you got there?
I was 20.
20.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a few months shy of my 21st birthday.
Was it weird hanging out with white people?
It was. And what I will say, the weirdest part was looking for all the signs that had been a part of my life.
Right.
Because I do remember my cousin saying to me one time, they'd been here about 5 years before us, and I was traveling with her into the city, and I said to her, which carriage do we go in? And she goes, you're not in South Africa anymore.
Oh my goodness, it's crazy.
So it takes a while to get that, I suppose, that way of being. And so I would look for I didn't know if I could go to which section of the library I could go to in the city. It took a while to actually shed all of that.
And what year was that? What year was that you moved?
So we migrated in 87.
87.
1987, yeah.
Wow. So when you migrated, you became Australian. You immediately started to hate New Zealanders, I would imagine, right?
No, because we had a lot of friends who migrated to New Zealand. So Australia, New Zealand, and Canada were the main countries people migrated to. Because I wanted to go to America, but you guys make it a little bit hard for us to come over there.
It's gotten even harder since then, I got to tell you.
Yeah, we could. There were too many hoops in American migration law. So
unless you're ready to swim across a river or run across a desert, you got no hope. Okay, so you're now in Australia. I assume you went to college. You finished college in Australia.
Finish uni in Australia. Yes.
Got it. Okay, so we've been on the air for like 30 minutes now. We're going to fast forward up to whatever it is you do today, because clearly all this stuff was way more interesting. So what are you now? You're a career coach, life change person.
Career coach. So I was in corporate for a lot of years. Had my own kind of traumas in relationship, and then had to
been there, Wendy. Yeah, I understand. We could talk about that in the next episode.
I had to figure out a way to make more money, because I was about to be a single mom. I was pregnant when my relationship ended, and really it was desperation that led me to go and seek help from hiring people, recruiters, whatever. I picked their brains, took them out for coffee, literally was picking anybody's brain, because in my head I need to make an extra 20 grand a year. I managed to figure out a system, and I started to get success, and I jumped my income by probably 50 grand within the space of 6 months. I was like, okay, I have a winning system here. And then I started, people who knew me, knew what I'd come through, what I'd been through, where I'd been, the rock bottom that I had hit, came for help. And that's where I actually started the career coaching. So I was working
Well, hold on, Wendy, I'm sorry. Whenever I hear about rock bottom, I want to hear about rock bottom. Like, that's way more interesting. Let's talk about rock bottom for 2 minutes here. What was rock bottom for you? Where did you find yourself that you were like, wow, this is it?
So rock bottom was the end of a relationship that ended quite violently, where I almost lost my daughter.
Oh, wow.
And also lost my home. So I had worked numerous jobs because, I was quite ambitious to get the home. We had moved into the home, and then once the relationship ended, he walked away. The house sold at a loss, so there was massive debt.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so for me, it was emotional rock bottom.
Well, among other things, emotional, financial,
everything, collided.
And you were pregnant? You were pregnant at the time?
I was pregnant, 4 months pregnant when that all came to a head.
Okay.
Yeah, so for me, that was rock bottom, because I had reasonable success in my career, and then losing everything that I'd worked so hard for. So I had to start again with a baby in the belly.
Usually the rock bottom story is a lot funner than that one was, I got to tell you, usually. But okay, I understand. Okay, so you're there, but you dug your way out of it relatively quickly, it sounds like. I mean, you figured it out.
Yeah, dug my way out of it, created my systems, and started to develop success, and then people came for help, friends, colleagues, family, because they knew the circumstances that had come through, and they're like, how did she get from there to there so quickly? But it was all hard work system, lots of sacrifice, and actually networking, talking to people. I'm a writer, I've always loved words, and I started to figure out how to write in the language that hiring people wanted to see. And that's how my success happened. And then I worked in corporate in a fairly senior position for 23 years, but alongside that, I was helping other people in their career. I was helping them grow. I was growing in my career, but it was also help. And then when I hit the midlife mess, which was menopause for me.
Yes, familiar with that too.
I left corporate, and I took my business full time. So that's what I do now.
I got to tell you, I get people a lot. I love the corporate to entrepreneur stories. So what was the moment or the day or the realization, I'm leaving this rat race, I'm going to do my own thing? Like, what happened?
Well, the catalyst was actually my uncle, my favorite uncle, was very sick at the time, and he sick with cancer. And I was spending, obviously I left work now, I was spending a lot of time visiting him in the hospice and so on. And then he passed away. And the day of his funeral, or the day before his funeral, I let my boss know. They knew what was going on. And I obviously attended the funeral, but my phone was blowing up throughout the funeral. And it was my boss trying to get me to do some stuff. And I don't know, there was a moment, it was also, I was going through that midlife change as well.
Sure.
And something in me snapped. And when I came back to work on the Monday, she came to me and she said, I was trying to reach you. And I said, you knew I was attending the funeral. I'll let you know. I prepared everything I needed to prepare for you. And I told you that I was not going to be at work that day. And her response was, it was so bizarre. Her response was, well, I'm available to the project 24/7. That's what she said to me.
Wow. Adios. Nice knowing you.
And that was it for me. I just looked at her. I don't even know how or why the words came out of my mouth, but I just said to her, well, I'm not. And I said, here's my 2 weeks resignation.
Yeah, because you had some common sense, Wendy. I mean, that's awesome. I love that. Fuck her, bitch. Let's find her. Anyway. Okay, so and how long ago was that you started doing your own thing?
So that was 2018, yeah. So I've been full-time in my own business since 2018. And now I've gotten the business to the stage where I work 4 days a week. So I don't work 5 days.
So give me the elevator pitch. Give me the elevator pitch of your business.
Well, I help midlife and mid-level careerists either land the promotions they want, land the new industries that they want, create a business, so have transferable skills to be able to create a business that's saleable. And I always say, get to love Monday mornings again.
That would be a first in my life. I'm calling you. When we're done with this podcast, I'm calling you, Wendy. Are you kidding me? Wow. And who finds you? Like, who are the type of people? I mean, you're getting people from all over the world. Is it through your website? Is it through referrals?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is where I get most of my people from. Yeah, and that's across the world. So I work with a lot of people in Asia, so Singapore, Hong Kong. That's where a lot of my clients come from. New Zealand, Australia, some in the US, not many. Some in the UK. So I'm starting to penetrate the US and UK market, but most of it has been sort of this part of the world. The Asia Pacific part of the world. And people find me on LinkedIn. I put up a lot of content, daily postings, lots of tips and tricks, and that's how people find me. They listen to my little 5-minute videos or they look at my posts. And then these days, it's mostly referrals. So people have worked with me, then they send their friend. And then I've also lately started helping some grads. And that's because I've worked with their parents. And so their parents are sending their graduate kids to me to get that start, get that strong start in their career.
So we don't have to get too deep into the weeds, but give me kind of like a concept of what it's like working with you. Like, what are the things you're looking at? What are the things you try and change? What areas you try and help them with?
Well, the area that I find is the hardest for most people is to identify the achievements and the wins that they've had in life. So we're wired from young not to brag and boast. So sometimes when we have these amazing achievements, whether it's in our personal life or in our professional life, we don't recognize them as something valuable to someone else.
Well, I got to tell you, I've never had that problem, Wendy. I got to, but maybe I'm special. I don't know. I got it.
Well, and I think that's awesome that you don't have that problem because a lot of people do. They struggle. And if I start digging with them into their stories, they go, but that's not an achievement. Because I just do that. They do it automatically. It's so natural to them. I'm like, yeah, but someone else doesn't do that as naturally as you do. So we need to frame it up in a way that you can sell that achievement. And a lot of it is around leadership. It's around problem solving. It's around working with people, leveling people up. People don't see that. They go, oh, but I just do that. Well, when you're working in companies, especially these days post the pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. Some people are still shell-shocked. Most companies are looking for people who can step up and lead people and elevate them. And so those skills become transferable soft skills, I call them. They become super, super important. And a lot of people don't know that. They tend to focus on their tech skills or their role or job-specific skills. But these days, companies are hiring for what they call EQ skills, emotional intelligence skills.
Well, yeah, look, I think these generations who are coming up now, the millennials and Gen X and not Gen X, Gen Z, like they don't know how to talk to people anymore. You know,
Correct.
I mean, they've been inside their phone their whole lives. Like, and I see it with people that we hire. You know, these kids don't understand the concept of working with other people, collaboration, small talk. They totally don't understand. They're like terrified of having to say hello in the morning. I mean, it's very strange. I mean, and companies, look, us who are a little bit older, we know that companies thrive on that. They thrive on having cohesive environments with people who are engaged with each other. And the kids below us are having trouble with it. So I'm a big fan of case studies. Give me your favorite case study. Some loser who walked in the door, who you turned into like a Fortune 500 CEO or something.
Well, no, I think often the people that come for career coaching, I don't tend to think they're losers because they recognize that they need help.
Okay, well, that's spoken like a true career coach. I guarantee you, I think they're a loser. And what did you do to turn them into the golden swan?
Well, one example is this guy was a GP in Singapore, but he was really, really interested in technology. And so we ended up framing up some of his work, especially because he led certain changes in the health industry. We framed up that leadership, and he ended up landing a lead role, the health lead of Asia Pacific at Microsoft.
Oh, wow. Right? Wow, that's
baller. That was a really great success story. Super happy guy, because that's where he always wanted to go. He was interested in both serving people, as in healthcare, so he became a doctor, but he was also fascinated by technology and especially what it could do in the health industry. So that was one great success story. The other one is a woman who, she had her own business for a lot of years. But, you know, when you get to that, she also a midlife woman, when she got to that stage of life where there's a lot of change, she found it quite stressful running. Because, you know, when you're running your own business, you're constantly drumming up your business. You have to be in that game. And so we ended up, what she was always interested in doing was she liked helping people. She was particularly interested in helping people with disability. And the other passion was animals. So in the end, she's working. So we framed up different things. And I said to her, you don't have to work for the one company. You can do a hybrid career.
Well, she could have dealt with crippled animals too, you know? I mean, that would have been the easy way out.
Well, she ended up working as a veterinary vet assistant.
There you go.
Helping
crippled animals.
Helping animals, but she's also working in disability. So she has a hybrid career.
That's great.
Working 3 days a week in the one area and 2 days a week in the other. And she loves it, you know?
Well, Wendy,
it was about getting her to see that working two jobs in two completely different areas wasn't a stigma. It's great to have a hybrid career. It's in fact healthy, because if you're pursuing passions, a lot of the time you've got more than one passion. Can't you do more than one passion?
Absolutely. Well, Wendy, you've been on quite a journey. I'll tell you.
I have.
Went from being born a crime to like rebirthing people's careers. I mean, it's pretty amazing. How do people find you? How do they get in touch with you?
So happycareerhub.com is my website. Best way to find me. And then also on LinkedIn. Wendy A. Alexander is the handle at LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Well, Wendy, thank you so much for coming out. I mean, it's really been a lot of fun. You know, I told you before we started this thing, I said I always try to do the background, and it always ends up being the funnest part of the year, and it really was. In your case, I mean, it's a really kind of remarkable story and journey, and you're a lovely person. I'm really so happy that you're doing all these great things, and you're helping people, you know, get through their middle-age messes, and that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Awesome. Okay, well, everybody go find Wendy on LinkedIn. Like and subscribe to Middle Age Mess and Dan and Dante, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.